Steve, you have some questions from the audience.
Yeah, it's probably too many that to answer, but I will do my best to prioritize them and get the questions to the panel that best fit this group, and there'll be an opportunity to talk to some of the panelists afterwards if your question doesn't get answered today. So just a general question. This is sort of an angry question, but I think this panel will be capable of answering it. Can we call the major banks financial terrorists, and do the powers that be also have a new system they want to put in place to fight the global insurrection we are starting to see?
You guys watch Max Kaiser? Anybody? Yeah, he's had this sort of financial, RT. Yeah, I think he coined, well, I don't know, a lot of people did, but coined the idea of financial terrorism. Financial terrorism, it's holding capital captive. I mean, that is what's going on, and yes, the major banks act as financial terrorists by holding governments hostage, by holding deposits hostage, by requiring help to sort of go about their way, by committing crimes with impunity, and effectively creating instability in the economy that doesn't need to be in the economy. So for all of those reasons, they act as terrorizers of the economy, I think.
Okay, another question. This is about the Bank of North Dakota and how it compares to D.C. Is North Dakota really an apt comparison, given how small the state's population is, as well as the funds that come from a booming oil industry?
I think that if we compare North Dakota to D.C., it's a small population in North Dakota, and we're a fairly large city, so I think it's fairly comparable. With regard to the fracking and the oil, the Bank of North Dakota was very, very successful long before there was fracking in North Dakota. Fracking upsets me really a lot. My understanding is that the Bank of North Dakota has not been financing the fracking. They have done some infrastructure, like improve a road so the trucks can get through, but they haven't really been financing the fracking. They are financing local businesses and farmers. During the Depression, when the farmers couldn't keep up with their mortgage payments, the Bank of North Dakota sort of took back the mortgage, and after the Depression, they worked with the farmers so that the farmers did not lose their farms. So there's a lot of, and when there was a big flood in the Red River, they came in, they made the loans long before the federal government, could do anything. They came in and kept the economy going. There's a lot of really good examples of what they've done. I think we need to be sure that when we set up the public bank in Washington, D.C., that the legislation that sets up the bank sets the purpose of the bank. Yeah. And that's why when we talk about what we want for the Public Bank of D.C., we talk about the 4 pillars, about affordable housing, about funding small businesses, about environmental sustainability, about local infrastructure. That has got to get written into the law, so they can't mess with us.
Can I just add to that if you talk to most progressive mayors or people in many American cities right now, the affordable housing piece is a total crisis. We are gentrifying ourselves into some pretty absurd situations, and I think that's certainly one place where a public bank could play an immediately very useful role.
And also it's the idea where North Dakota actually manages its money. Yes, on the one hand, some of it's coming in from its oil revenues, but it's also coming in from people in North Dakota, and it's going back to people in North Dakota, and that's the entire point. North Dakota, there's nothing that keeps it from doing, very risky things with money. It's not. It's going into student loans, it's going into housing, it's going into small businesses. So it's also about the choice, and it's doing that successfully. So that's where there is comparability or potential comparability between D.C. and North Dakota, or anywhere in North Dakota in the United States.
So we've got two related questions here. Please provide examples of how the community might exercise democratic control of public banks, as well as ways bank officials may be held accountable. And if bank officials can be voted for, who can vote? Is disenfranchise an issue here as it is in other public elections?
You would have a board, but not like the kind of board that gets their ballots, which they do for Jamie Dimon, and it actually says, vote for Jamie Dimon to continue to be CEO and chairman. Vote for his pay. They actually show you how to vote, and so and so that's the problem with that the board members tend to be his friends, or companies that have business attachments. Whereas if we had a community bank or a public bank, at that level, then board members might be just, they could be selected, they could be elected, they could be more accountable to the locality. I mean, that's the whole thing about creating a mandate. You figure out how to do it. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be voting these insane payments to go out to individuals. They will be responsible for ensuring that the money of the bank gets used according to the mandate of the bank. That would be their job, period, as board members.
Let me say a word about that as well, in particularly the beginning, both about the North Dakota Bank, which came out of basically a populist and socialist movement over 100 years ago, that institutions of this kind at this stage are really important to put on the table and begin developing, but they will be taken over unless a movement builds with them. It's critical. And the message that Bernie's been giving, which I think has been lost, he says it again and again and again, nobody picks it up, is it's about building the movement, not just about getting elected, not just about the policies and programs. And I can give you a kind of another illustration of that. One of the people at the Democracy Collaborative got very interested in a tale I picked up, and it's been speaking in Vermont. And co-op banks, credit unions, elect boards. Every member has a vote. In Burlington, they were able to, nobody goes to these meetings. I mean, who goes to a credit union meeting? Anybody here? Ever been? 3. Okay, this is big. That's big. That's big. So what happens is that the insiders control the game, and they elect their guy who runs it, and he gets maybe $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and the staff comes to the meetings to vote. So it theoretically and indeed legally, it is open to the members to vote and do anything they want. But there is very little movement to build and take over these public, community institutions and use them properly. So so it's really important to keep that part of it, the movement building part, in perspective. The Sawyer was going to tell us that one of the people at the Democracy Collaborative got very interested in the Vermont story, and we tried to set up a kind of a way to bring votes to one of the credit unions in this area. John, you'll remember the name of it. Or maybe you won't. I don't. So the Lafayette, that's right. And the credit union, here's the way the game's played, so why the movement issue is so important. They moved their meeting to a country club from Maryland to a country club with no access by subway in Virginia. That was their annual meeting. Anybody can join, and you could go there and vote, but it's a little bit difficult they made it hard, and a number of us went and began talking. The room was lined with hired cops. They thought there was going to be a resurrection, an insurrection. That would be a resurrection. The reaction was that this is really powerful stuff. These people are going to take us over. So, but the critical point about this is any of the institutions we're talking about, including a public bank, will not actually do its job unless we pick up on what Harold said, and what the point is that there must be the politics that informs this, or they will all become decayed. So I just want to I'm sure people in this room know that, but I want to underscore it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, just how important that public education, and I think it's movement building, but it's also making sure we keep educating ourselves, right, and keep reminding. I don't know what we can put in the actual legislation to make it more democratic, but we need to think about that. But it clearly needs to be, right, a public movement. The one thing that helps is, as a public bank, there's transparency, right? So if you have open books, that also helps a lot, because there's not this hidden stuff. That's everybody has to be able to see the books and understand how things are being spent, where it's coming in, what's going out, whatever. That also helps. I think we could also connect it to a participatory budgeting movement, where community gets to actually say what happens to the city budget, and we already have that happening in New York and Chicago and stuff like that.
Let me just say one more piece about that, because, and again, picking up both what you and Harold said, there are these pieces that are beginning to develop around the country. Worker co-ops, public banking, utility takeovers, land trust development, movement building in many communities. It hasn't yet crystallized in many cities. Seattle's another example, obviously, there. But the crystallization of a movement around these integrated pieces is part and parcel of what we're talking about, is to really make sure you have control, rather than an institution that get taken over by the same people who usually take them over without a movement.
And this is also part of the conversation we want to have ongoing with you in terms of the structure of the bank. This isn't just for a couple of us to make that decision. It's a decision that we need to have a conversation about.
Here's a very provocative question for Gar, not from me. Given the trend towards privatization of schools, highways, military, such as mercenaries, health, utilities, highways, water, national parks, I would add the Milky Way galaxy, how could you claim we are moving towards social ownership of services?
So let me, first there's an empirical base to the development of things that are going on the ground. I won't repeat what I've been saying, but there's a website I give you which is community-wealth, put the dash in, and you will find that the Democracy Collaborative kind of catalogs this stuff. You cannot, one of the things to mention is you cannot find this in the newspapers. The newspapers don't report on it. But there are many, in each one of these areas, in the co-op area, in the worker ownership, in each one of these areas, there are networks that are reporting, and they're kind of brought together at that, so you can begin to see how much is going on under the surface. I think, look, it is possible that they will win because they have all the chips. Okay. It is also possible that they're painting themselves into a corner, that the pain levels are growing, that the experimentation is developing, and that a historical movement is developing. And one never knows the outcome of this, right? You pays your money and you takes your bets. But what is really interesting is that for the first time, and certainly in my adult life, this is much more interesting than the 60s. Far more interesting, because there's institution building going on. And ordinary people, not just college kids who are really worried about the draft, and a lot of that. And I was heavily involved in that movement, not as in the draft, but the anti-war movement. But there is something going on that's coming out of the pain that is being created, and the fraud and the dishonesty that I think, I'm not a utopian, but as a historian, the preconditions of what could become a transformative movement, I think, are real. And so that's the place to put the energy, obviously, and to begin building forward on all these pieces. So we shall see. We shall see. You never know when you make, you make your commitments, and then you see. You don't see before you make your commitments. So I'm on the side of let's give it a shot. You can't. Everything counts anyway. Very little to lose if you build forward in a positive way, and just possibly this generation could lay the foundations for something transformative. And that's the way. That's the kind of the basis of my position, but also the work we're doing on the Next System project and at our Center at the Democracy Collaborative.
Wonderful. Jessica, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say the other interesting thing that's happening with privatization, and don't get me wrong, I'm not for it, but it is interesting that if you look in what happened in Italy, and it's happening a little bit in the U.S., and we're hoping it will happen more, is the growth of social co-ops. So while the government and the public things got privatized, actually half of them became worker-owned co-ops instead of total private businesses. And if you think about, remember Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, that was what he was trying to do. Unfortunately, he died, and they're still trying to do a little bit of it, but since they don't have a mayor in control, they can't. But one of his platforms was to take those so-called the movement to privatize industries in the city of Jackson and to move them into co-op ownership and worker co-ops. And he was supposed to have this huge program that would develop, first teach people about co-ops, then do co-op incubators, and have people take over some of those services that were being privatized as social co-ops. And I think we still have the ability to think about doing that at the same time that we want to maybe try to stop some of the privatization.
So the last question of the evening is, where do we start?
Right now, tonight.
That's it.
And I'm going to use that question to have Mary Bolton come up and talk about our campaign and where we're going.
I hope you all have enjoyed this evening. I'm really pleased to see everyone here. It's great. We've been at this for 4 years. 2011 at the Democracy Convention in Madison. I was at every workshop screaming, we got to come to Washington and shut it down, stop it. And Ms. Kaplan said to me at one workshop, Mary, don't do that. Come with me and start a public bank. I said, interesting. Why not? I didn't vet her. I didn't think about it. I just said, I'm on. And it's taken 4 years of learning to work together with the people we had on the steering committee, drilling down into the details, trying to sort it out, trying to figure it out, trying to grapple, wow, it is our money. It's not their money. We've just given them the right to control it. Well, wow, okay, taking it back is going to be a process, but why not? Letting them have it is obviously a dead deal. My point is, now we're here. This is our coming out party. We've had 3 events today, and they've all been fantastic. The point is that the bankers don't want it, the Wall Street people don't want it, Jack Evans doesn't want it, the Council of 100 doesn't want it, Federal City Council doesn't want it, the Oversight Committee doesn't want it. So what? Do we want it? Well, if we want it, then we have got to learn to educate ourselves, stay in it. We need petition signings. We need to get you to go out and talk to your friends, your coworkers. You have a bunch of people at work. You want to have a lunchtime rap session with us. We'll come and we'll lecture people and teach them and share with them. Get on our website, look at what we're doing, volunteer, like us on Facebook. It turns out the Zuckerberg theme, the more people that like us, the more people that we are able to reach. Duh. I don't understand it, but it's okay. So I'm not media savvy, frankly, but I am a community organizer and I'm a kick-ass kind of person. And my thought is truth will out. And we have to come together across lines of race, class, age, whatever, and decide we want to make this happen. And as Naomi, I'm sure, said, even though I wasn't here for her lecture because I've heard it before, I mean, when the State Bank of North Dakota can return 19%, and these Wall Street banks are returning 10%, and most of that's going to their CEOs in obscene salaries, I don't want to live in a world where we have uber-rich people. We are looking at the face of climate change. We have to change our economic system in order to survive. It's connected. So we need to come together, folks. You need to find a way to get involved. You need to find a way to reach out to your friends, your neighbors, whomever. All right, I'm sort of like repeating myself, so I'm going to shut up now. But yes, stay involved. Make it your struggle. Energize yourselves, make it happen with us, because we're not giving up. And as I said, sign the petition, get your friends, blast out your friends on email, let them blast out other people, volunteer in any way we can. We need to have benefits. We need to do a feasibility study. We need MBA students that can help us and maybe trade off helping us trying to work on a feasibility study with getting credit from their school. We need a lot of ideas. We need a lot of input. We need a lot of help. It's not going to happen because the 4 or 5 of us on the steering committee are committed to making it go. So you got to get involved. If you like it, and please help us. Thanks.
Again, thank you everyone for coming, and it was a wonderful evening. And don't forget those envelopes on your chairs. We'd really appreciate your help.